So another question I'm asked frequently is, when can I mow after seeding? Well, that depends. Depends on when your seeding is done, what time of the year, the temperatures, how well you're watering. That's the major thing that you have to worry about, is if you're watering correctly or not. If you're not, chances are it's going to take a lot longer before you can mow. So you need to be watering correctly, so your grass seed will germinate quickly and come on in. And let's say all that's happening, or it's raining consistently, and your new seed has started to germinate. First question I'm gonna ask you is, how high are you cutting your grass? It needs to be a minimum of 4 inches. A minimum of 4 inches. Now, a lot of folks really get confused with this because they have these mowers and they go out there and they put their mower on setting number 4. Well, setting number 4 does not mean that it's 4 inches tall. It does not mean that. I've seen mowers that go up to 7 or 8 on the setting, and it be cutting the grass 3 inches, 3.5. So you cannot look at that. So here's the way you do this. You get a ruler. These are one we have with our company. We've given them out to our clients in the past, so you should have one if you're a client. If not, you can just use a regular ruler, tape measure, whatever you want to. And we're going to come right here on your mower deck, and you're going to put your mower deck on the highest setting that you have. All right, so this is mine next to the highest setting, and I'm at 4.25 inches, which is perfect. That's where I want it to be. Now, if I went all the way to the highest setting, that would be my summertime cut, which is more like 4.5 or 4.75. But we're going into cooler weather, fall of the year. Chances are we'll be getting better rainfall, so I can manage to cut it a little bit shorter. And what my definition of a little bit shorter is 4 inches. Now, I will not lower the deck at all to prepare for winter. Let me say that one more time, because I get asked that question a lot too. Should I cut the grass lower going into winter? The answer is no, you should not. You should keep that grass blade at 4 inches going into winter. I found that the yard will perform better if you do that. So now that we know our mower deck is at 4 inches, or our mower blade is at 4 inches, let's go look at the yard. It's not too awful dirty, just a little bit. Something else you want to do. Look how nice and shiny and sharp that blade is. Most people do not sharpen their blades nowhere near enough. They should be sharpened on a very routine basis. You're cutting this grass quite often during the summer, so you need to sharpen your blades quite often. It's kind of like going to the barber shop and trying to get a haircut with a dull pair of scissors. It doesn't turn out good. So definitely get those blades sharp. Look at that edge on that thing. Okay, so here is what we consider the test plot for GCI Turf. It's where I do a lot of testing on different materials and products and liquids and fertilizers and you know, all kind of things to make sure they're going to perform well in a yard before we actually put them on a customer's yard. So this is the section of grass that I done the DIY aeration and seeding. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. You'll remember this spot over here was all bare dirt, because this is where it went from my well, from my irrigation line. So you can see that's starting to fill in good. Now, the way I make my mind up whether I'm going to mow or not, I'll come out to the yard and I'll get down here and I'll take my ruler and I'll bury it down in the grass. And you can see there, I've got some blades that are sticking up around 5.5 inches maybe. Somewhere in that ballpark. Some of them may be 6. Now you can tell the yard hasn't really thickened up considerably yet. Well, the reason for that is it hasn't been mowed yet. Mowing and cutting this new baby grass is going to help it to thicken up and mature faster. So we just measured the grass and it's around 5 to 6 inches. So a good rule of thumb is to never cut more than 1/3 of the grass blade off. So if I'm going to mow it 4 inches high, I'm cutting 2 inches off. That's roughly 1/3, because if you take the 2 inches I'm cutting off and multiply it times 3, you get the 6 inches total. It's simple basic math. Now of course, if your mower doesn't cut at 4 inches, you may want to cut a touch sooner than that. All right, I know you're already going to ask, well, what about the spots that hadn't came in yet? Well, let's look at one of those. You can see this spot right here, and it's got baby grass coming up in it. It hadn't filled in completely because it hadn't had the time to do so. I've been watering diligently. You can see I've got sprinklers set up everywhere out here. There's one, there's one, there's one. And this grass just hasn't had time to come up, and that's completely fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mow around this area, and I'm not going to mess with this. Areas over here, let's go back over here and look at this spot. There's no way I would send a lawnmower across this area. I'll mow up to where the grass is good here and cut it off, and I'll just leave this alone. And I'm going to let that come in, and I'm going to let that get to about 4.5, 5, 6 inches tall before I even consider cutting that. Why would I run those heavy tire tracks over brand new baby grass? Now, if I had a yard that had a lot of this in it, or a renovation yard, I would push mow that renovation yard 3 or 4 times before I put a heavy mower on it. No way in the world I'd ever put a big mower on a yard full of baby grass. It doesn't make sense to me. So let's get with it. I'm gonna mow, and you'll kind of get an idea of how the grass blades, what it should look like coming out the side of the deck. It shouldn't be rolling out of the deck. It shouldn't be clumping up. That's another good thing. Never mow with the grass blades wet. We got 2 inches of rain yesterday. The ground is moist. It's okay to mow like that, but I'm talking about the actual grass blades itself need to be dry when you cut your grass. And that's just for all year long. It's just, you don't want to mow wet grass. That just leads into all kind of problems. So let's get with it. Okay, don't forget to get your water hoses up. So have you ever wondered if a lawnmower, if a mower blade and a water hose got in a fight, who would win? There you go. Those of you with big, heavy, zero-turn mowers, you need to do the 3-point turn. You need to be extremely careful on new grass. Extremely careful. All right, there we go. Nice and clean cut. Now, here's the importance of those sharp blades I told you about earlier. If you can, I'm gonna try to show you this. We'll see. That's pretty clean. Whoop, there we go. See it right here? Look at that one little booger I didn't catch. Well, that's okay. I see it so many times. Folks will run over their yard and mow it 2 or 3 times after the seeding because they want that nice, tight, clean cut. Don't do it. You can get your nice, clean, tight cut once the grass hardens off and thickens up. And it will thicken up by mowing it more often. So, fall of the year, we're in the Piedmont. It's not going to grow quite as aggressive as springtime grass, but it's going to grow fairly well. I'll probably cut once a week back here, whereas springtime you'll need to be cutting twice a week at least. So as you mow more over the course of the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, this grass is going to tighten up. And what I mean by that is, you kind of look down in here, it looks a little thin. You can actually still see some of the cores from where it was plugged. That's okay. It's not going to hurt a thing. The water will melt those right back into the ground. But this grass will begin to thicken up and harden off, and those little teeny tiny thin grass blades will begin to widen up and thicken up some. And then once the grass becomes a little more tough or durable after 3 or 4 cuts, then you can maybe double cut on occasion or whatever. So the next question, I already know I'm gonna get asked, should I bag it or not? Well, my answer is simple for bagging grass. I never bag my grass ever, all year, unless there's a very unique special occasion. And I just can't think of one right now. If I went on vacation for 2 weeks and came back and the yard was a foot deep, first of all, I'd hire someone to mow it while I was gone, because I would not allow my grass to get that deep. But if you had to, if you don't want nobody else cutting your grass, then I might bag it, because it would make a mess, obviously. Other than that, I discharge the turf 365 days a year, every time I cut it. The reason being is, it's been proven time and time again that if you discharge your clippings or mulch your clippings, that's equivalent to 1 free fertilizer application a year, by putting the clippings back on the turf, back on the ground. That's not leaving them clumped up and in balls and big chunks everywhere. Like my mower cuts it, it evenly disperses the clippings. When I'm walking out through this yard, I see 0 visible clippings. That's because I didn't let it get too deep before I cut it, 1. And 2, I sharpen my blades. Very, very important stuff when you're cutting your grass for the first time after overseeding. So, man, I hope this helps. I hope this answers every question you ever had about mowing after an aerating and seeding job, because that's, other than watering the yard, that's probably the second most asked question I get all year. So I hope this helps. And what do you do now? Well, let me show you. Well, there you go. You guessed it. Water away. Now, if you have an irrigation system, it is so easy for you to overwater, because you have the luxury of simply pressing the button and letting it go, or you can set your timer and let it go. Well, the problem with that is we're going into cooler temperatures during the day, so the ground holds moisture better than it would if it's hot. So you really have to pay close attention. So once you mow for the first time, you need to begin giving your yard 1 inch of water per week, no more. If you're in shady spots, maybe in 1/2 inch per week. Now, how do you do that? Well, I'll put a link to the video I made on that in the description so you can check it out. These particular heads right here, these run off of, these are, sprinklers that you drag a hose around. I have to run those about 2.5 hours to actually get 1 inch. So you can see I've got one there, one here, and one over there. And I'll let those run for about 2.5, maybe 3 hours. And then today is Wednesday. I won't water this section again until next Wednesday. But tomorrow, I'll move these sprinklers out along the road and do that section. And then the next day, that section. And then the next day, that section. And I'll do that all the way up until we get into about the first frost. Now, take rainfall into consideration. It's very important you have a rain gauge. If you have a rain gauge, you see that you get 1 inch of rain, that means you don't water for the next 7 to 10 days, depending on the temperature. It's all about monitoring the moisture in the ground. That's very important this time of the year, especially if you're going to be mowing, because you don't want to mow in a sloppy, wet yard. So, I hope this helps. Look at that water hitting that new grass right there. Man, I love it. That grass is going to jump out of the ground screaming. All right, I hope this answers all the questions about mowing after aerating and seeding, when to mow, how to mow, all that kind of good stuff. Like, subscribe, do all that cool stuff. GCI Turf Academy coming January 1st. Peace out. So what if you have a big yard and you can't water it? It's physically impossible to water it. Just wait on the rain. That's about all we can do.